The Nintendo Switch represented a dream come true to me in a lot of ways. A portable console that I can also play on my TV is the kind of thing that I imagine this thing should be able to do way back then. I mean, technically it could with things like Super Game Boy, but this is a much more elegant solution. And the Switch also represented a return to form for Nintendo, which weathered some bad times because of the Wii U. There's a lot to love about the Nintendo Switch, but there's one design feature that has bothered me for a while, and I mentioned this on Twitter the other day, and I found out that I'm not alone. So I need to spread the word because this bothers me so much. I'm talking about the offset analog sticks. Now, I know, yes, on the Nintendo Switch, this makes a lot of sense. After all, the whole selling point of this thing is the fact that you can detach the Joy-Cons as they, why am I explaining the Joy-Con? You know what this is. You take it apart and now you have a controller and your buddy has a controller and they're fully functional because they basically have, you know, what would be kind of like the D-pad here, right? Like an analog stick, then the face buttons on either side here and shoulder triggers. So you can give this to a friend and play games. So with just the one console, you can play multiplayer games with your friends. A great idea, right? In theory. I'm not sure if I'm alone here, and you tell me, but I ended up using this way less than I think Nintendo wanted me to. And not only that, but now I know that I'm an outlier. I review technology on YouTube, so I get sent a lot of controllers, most of them for the Nintendo Switch, meaning that I don't really have to rely on Joy-Cons for couch multiplayer. But regardless, even before I reviewed controllers, this isn't a feature that I used all that much. Because of this whole thing, they had to design each Joy-Con in a way that it makes sense as a regular standalone controller. That's why the analogs are offset the way they are. That's also why we don't get a D-pad on the left one, which is a whole other problem. Again, even if I'm maybe not the target demographic for this use case, I get it. It makes a lot of sense. It's very clever. It's the kind of innovation that we're used to seeing from Nintendo. Nintendo likes to take risks, and I like this a lot, even if I don't use it all that much. However, the problem with being a company like Nintendo is that you get to set trends. The trend of the offset analog stick made it to consoles where it has no business being a part of. I'll give an example. I have an RG350 here. Have I reviewed this on the channel yet? I can't remember. I took a little break. I know, I'm sorry. As you can see, this borrows a noticeable design inspiration from Nintendo and not just the Game Boy color scheme. I'm talking, of course, about the asymmetric joysticks. Now, on this side right here, this actually makes a lot of sense because when you're holding the console, you got your hand resting against the side like this, and your thumb will naturally rest on top of the analog stick. Of course, that is not the same on this side because they wanted it to be like Nintendo so bad. They made it so that you have to, basically you can't hold this thing in the proper way the human hand is supposed to grip objects. Instead of like holding it like this thing feels like a nice little brick. Instead of holding it like this, right? So if the analog stick was above the action buttons, your thumb would naturally rest on it just like it does on this side here. But it doesn't, which forces your hand to jut out like this. You're holding this thing like this with your fingertips, putting your hand in like a weird, like you're holding your hand like this, right? So on this side, this is smooth sailing right here, comfortable. And then on this side, you got that weird claw going on. Not great. And this is not the only case, right? Like the Mochi i7S right here. This one I know I reviewed here because I pronounced it Moki and you guys would not let me forget it. Same thing, offset analog sticks. Proper placement on the left side and then whatever the hell this is on the right hand side. Even Nintendo themselves, they use this layout on the Switch Lite, which again doesn't have detachable Joy-Cons. Now, I guess at this point for Nintendo, it became a branding thing. People maybe would think it's weird if you buy a Switch. Let me put this thing back together. If you buy a Switch and then the analogs don't look like this. I mean, they even use this look in the brand. Like, you're not gonna be able to see it. Dan, can you put this up on the screen? Yeah, just like that, exactly. Thank you. Even the little icons on the user interface itself reference the offset analogs. So I kind of understand why Nintendo kept the trend going, even though in a console like the Switch Lite, it makes zero sense whatsoever. It's a very Apple-like decision from Nintendo, taking form over function and just like being too stubborn to change. That's the problem with a company as big and as successful and as influential as Nintendo. They create these things that becomes a trend, and then other companies that have no business following that trend follow the trend. And then I'm left with, like, what am I supposed to do with this? With the Nintendo Switch, at least, because it's such a popular runaway hit, there are a lot of accessories that help you mitigate the problem. And that's when you know your design team did a boo-boo, when you have to buy a thing to make holding your product more comfortable. You guys fucked up. There are things like the Satisfy grip, which basically protrude a little bit from the side here so that your hand has something to rest on. But on a portable, I don't want to be attaching things to it. I want this to be as practical and as straightforward as it gets. So I'm not down with like these grips. I mean, I get it. They look very comfortable, I'll tell you this, but that's a problem. And one that only makes sense on the traditional OG Nintendo Switch. It doesn't make sense on the Switch Lite, and it makes even less sense on devices like these, because these companies are not married to this design decision, right? It's not like on the interface, the offset analog sticks are going to show up, and then they're not going to make sense if the device itself isn't also offset like this. Does this bother anybody else but me? Because this bothers the hell out of me. Like every other portable console I've ever owned, you grip the fucking thing, you grab it, like it's resting right in the palm of your hand. Now, a lot can be said about these portables, that they will give your hand cramps, and it's not always super comfortable to hold for an extended period of time. But this is much worse, I would argue. Holding it like this, like am I doing something wrong here? Because like that's how you hold the Switch, right? Like, this hand is right here, gripping it nice and firm, like that, like you're supposed to. And this hand is like, you got this hover hand going on here, so that your thumb can like rest. Because like if you hold it like this, your thumb will rest on the action buttons. And if you're playing like a 2D side scroller or whatever on Switch Online, if you're still paying for that, I mean, I can't say because I am too, because I'm an idiot. So if you're playing like Donkey Kong or whatever, which they finally added to the Super Nintendo catalog here, only took them forever. If you're playing a game like that, then it's fine. You're holding it like God intended. But then if you're playing a 3D game, then you do that thing. So this is impotent complaining, because obviously they're not going to change this on my behalf. But maybe the guys who make these, because I know you listen to me because you sent me your stuff to review here. So could you knock this off? If you could, I would appreciate it.